Everyone, this is Jane with Barlow Herbal, and happy Sunday, August 31st of 2025. Now, I'm going to jump right into it because I have a lot of journaling that came in this week, and two different themes kind of came in, and I'm going to focus on the latter, but I wanted to bring in this first part because this lasted a couple of days. I ended up doing a little bit of research on a couple of the ideas I was thinking about, and I think this is really important to share because I really believe that so many people are feeling these same things. So the first thing I wrote in my journal, this was actually on Sunday, at the end of my day, I was just sitting looking at this beautiful day. We had some rain throughout the week here in August. Amazing, beautiful. So much joy and gratitude and pleasure happens when you just take a moment and sit with the elements in Mother Nature, which I do on a regular basis because it just calms my soul and all of that stuff. But here's the first thing I wrote. Did my soul really choose these lessons and hardships? And what about everyone else's soul? What about the suffering, the hardships, the lessons that we all go through? You know, you watch enough stuff as far as different things that are out there. You follow different mentors and masters, and you learn about suffering and why we should suffer and why, and you start to really ask yourself, you know, did my soul really choose these lessons? That's the very first thing I wrote. So all the things that people go through, like extreme poverty, homelessness, abuse, not just today, but throughout all of human history. These are the age-old questions, right? What about the teachings of David Icke and others? You know, the whole idea that suffering is loosh, okay? And this is something that if you've been on this journey, maybe kind of along the same vein or in an expansive kind of way that includes checking in or learning about people like David Icke. And I've actually been following him and reading his stuff for about 20 years. It really sped up during 2020 and since. But what I did is I wanted to give you an explanation, a definition of what loosh is. And some of you might know what that is, but it really is not even a concept or even a word that David Icke came up with. It was originally from a man named Robert Monroe. And he was here's what I found. Monroe was a pioneer of out-of-body experiences, and he wrote several books. And this is how he described loosh, which is spelled Loosh. It's a kind of universal energy that's produced by living beings. So it's not just, so it's like emotions, either, and I think loosh is supposed to, according to David Icke, be a bit of a negative thing. The lower frequencies, the lower emotions, the suffering, all the suffering emotions. It wasn't specifically sinister, according to Monroe. Rather, he portrayed it as a byproduct of life and emotions, which are necessary for the growth of consciousness. Okay, so that to me is a perfect explanation. And then David Icke took Monroe's kind of neutral, mystical explanation and idea, and he reframed it. Okay, and he actually gave it a little more of a demonic, maybe this is done on purpose to gather the energy of suffering and fear and angst and anxiety and sadness and all of that. And I think fear is at the top of the list of that because we dive into these horrible emotions so quickly, and it puts out such a frequency that I think fear is one of the top. But he describes it as, instead of a natural energy flow, a parasitic system of control where humanity is being farmed like cattle for our loosh, our energy, okay? So I thought that was really, for me, an important thing to define, okay? So then I wrote this: can we be in a tough, really tough situation, relationship, anything or everything, and choose to keep our frequency high? And immediately after that I wrote, of course we can. Again, an age-old question, which we've been asking ourselves this forever, okay? So to me that was pretty awesome to think about. And then I wrote a few things. I found a few things that I'm actually not going to go over because I think it's actually a really good place to leave that. But then the thing that dropped in for me is this, okay? And the concept I found is detachment without disengagement. So think about that. In fact, that's probably what I'm going to call this video, is the detachment that I've been feeling, but I haven't felt disengaged with life and with humanity and the compassion that I feel and all of that. But I've reached this certain detachment, right? Okay, so I've come to this deep realization over and over again. This is what I wrote in my journal. It's all about me, not from an egotistical place, but I'm the one who will get through this. I am the one who will save me, save. Okay, we've been hearing this for a long time. There's no one coming to save you, save us, whatever. Okay, what happens when you reach the point or place where you really embody this? And that's where I came up with the idea of detachment without disengagement. Okay, you feel like this. You get to watch the rest of humanity with a little bit of detachment. You know you're no longer upset, bothered, or triggered in any way. Okay, and this is exactly how I've been feeling. It's so fascinating to be here, aware, and observing. It feels like a complete detachment from ego and drama. The things that are going to play out will play out, right? And you don't need to be emotionally attached to them. Okay, so then I just came up with some really good stuff. Okay, so I'm so excited to share this with you. Okay, this is actually a well-recognized version of what you come to when you're on a spiritually enlightening path. When you drop into these deep questions and then you just become an observer, right? Where you get to detach without disengagement, okay? In fact, there's several wisdom traditions that also, some of these resonate with modern psychology. And I looked up some stuff that I'm really excited to share with you. So this is a place where you observe life unfolding without being constantly pulled into reactivity. So think about that. Something happens and you immediately react. Okay, so you reach this place where you're no longer pulled into reactivity. So there are several explanations for viewing life through this lens, and I found these so fascinating. The first one is a psychology explanation. Okay, this is called response flexibility in modern psychology. This is the ability to notice a stimulus, something that might normally bother or trigger you, and pause before reacting. So instead of being hijacked by your emotions, you can watch them arise and then dissolve. Because most of us don't pause. We don't pause to reflect. Unless we go on this journey and it comes with a whole lot of learning along the way, and then you just reach this point where you think, how I respond, it's all about me. It's not, and like I said, not from an egotistical place. So what can happen is this: over time, the shift feels like this is all about you, okay? In the sense that your inner state is no longer dependent on an outer circumstance or any of the outer circumstances that happen. No matter what's happening in your own personal sphere with your home, your spouse, your children, your partner, your neighborhood, your job, your city, whatever's happening, and then what happens in other states or in other countries or around the world, because we have such access to immediately see what's happening in other places of the world, and they like to show us all the negative stuff, and we immediately become reactive if this is the path that we just are on, right? And it's designed that way. So that's a psychological explanation, response flexibility. I really love that. In fact, I'm excited to have a chat with my nephew, who is an organizational psychologist, the one who's written all the books, Ben Hardy. These are the kind of conversations we really dig on and have so much fun talking about, because he could probably expand on the idea of response flexibility and give it more context than I could. So there's also a spiritual or a mystical explanation to this detachment without disengagement. So this basically describes a stage of personal sense of me, and it transforms, okay? This can be seen as a state of non-attachment. Suffering drops because clinging and aversion lessen. So the clinging to those ways that seem comfortable because they're just familiar to you, that all lessens, okay? You might be experiencing awareness recognizing itself. The realization that All of this arises in me as me. Okay, this is kind of like just different mystical teachings. And then Stoicism, right? Which is, I love the idea of Stoicism because when you embody this in different parts of your life, this is really detachment, right? Without disengaging. So beautiful. So here's what this is what the Stoics say. Stoics speak of cultivating indifference to what is outside your control, which leads to serenity. Okay? In this way, in all these ways, it's all about you, not as ego, but as awareness through presence, which is life experienced. And that's really what I find I have been after. I am after awareness and presence as I'm walking through life, experiencing it without being engaged in all the drama, you know? And I don't want to detach and be unemotional and be non-compassionate and non-empathetic. In fact, I don't think any of us are on any type of awareness journey want to detach from experiencing. In fact, to me, this deepens it. This deepens the beauty, the gratitude, the empathy, the compassion, the clarity, everything that I see. It deepens it into something more beautiful, right? And then there's a neuroscience angle to this, which I found this really fascinating. There's some evidence in long-term meditation, self-reflection, and inner work that actually changes your brain activity. Okay, and as modern humans, we love to study this stuff. We love the science, we love the neuroscience, we love how does our brain work and how does it change when we do different things? Because we know that even things like deep transcendental or even just regular meditation can change our brain activity. And there is a huge piece of this that's involved in that. Okay, so this is, let me read you what I wrote. The default mode network that is associated with referential thought, rumination, or ego identity quiets down. So all those things literally quiet down in the neurons of your brain, okay? That creates a sense of spaciousness and detachment. Life still happens, but the me that takes everything personally isn't running the show anymore. Wow, right? I actually love that. Now there is, what I found was really fascinating is that there is an integration piece of this. And as I researched this and I looked this up, I realized that a lot of these things, as far as the integration, I was just doing naturally. Because I think when you have years and years and years, unless you drop into this lifetime with already this type of awareness, many of us get to the age where I am, and we, as we're on this path, we find that there is an integration and then sometimes you F up and you do something that you're like, oh, well, I reacted poorly to that when I know better. I already know better. And then you course correct really quickly. So there's some really cool things about integration. And this is what I found. The important distinction is that you're not disassociating. You're not numbing out or escaping. Okay, you're not disassociating. Instead, you are reaching a place of peaceful clarity. You know, you still see humanity, you still engage, but without the weight of constant identification with every single drama. We don't need to identify with every single drama. And some people, that is the groove they have set their path on. That is their comfort zone. And that is what makes them feel empathetic and compassionate toward their fellow humans, is by engaging in the drama. Okay? So, and here's what I found. That's why it feels like a profound shift rather than a withdrawal. That's exactly what it feels like to me. Okay, so this is, in short, this realization is often described as a sign of maturity in awareness, where me no longer means the small ego self, but the larger field of consciousness in which all of the experiences arises. That's where it is. Okay. So I found some really, some beautiful things that you can do for each of these sections, which is really, really cool. So in the psychological practices, this is about strengthening the inner witness so that our nervous system doesn't default back back to reactivity. Okay, so here's some ideas. Mindful awareness in your daily life. So think of everything that annoys you, like traffic, a rude email, a delay, as like, anything that delays you. You wait in line for something, your internet goes down, your whatever it might be, right? So you just basically are thinking back to a place of all the things that happen in your life. Instead of tightening, so when you feel yourself tightening, what you do is you practice softening into observation. That is so beautiful. What will happen is over time, this rewires your nervous system to respond rather than to react. Because you still are going to need to respond in certain situations. If there's, you have to be really careful in traffic because you need to drive defensively. You're going to want to react in certain moments the proper way so that accidents don't happen, or all of this stuff. Okay, then this is really cool. This is a practice, a psychological practice. Journaling from a witness mode. So instead of just journaling, maybe this is I actually love this. So let me just read this. When you recount your day, shift your perspective. Okay, anger rose when this happened. Okay, and instead of saying they made me angry, change this to, let's see, this subtly but powerfully breaks identification with emotions. So this anger arose when X happened instead of they made me angry. So instead of saying this person made me angry, you can say I felt anger arose when this happened. And that's a subtle shift. It's a beautiful shift. And then think about body anchoring. Think about anchoring your physical body. And this is where what I love is actually literally grounding yourself in nature. Take your shoes off, stand on cement. You can still ground on cement. I don't know about asphalt, but I do know you can ground on cement if you don't have access to grass or the ground or dirt or the ocean. I know many people live near bodies of water where they can go stand in water at the ocean or by a lake, and you can literally get your feet wet while you're standing on the ground. And that is just brilliant. And I completely understand why so many people love living near water, because it is so grounding. So we need to look at emotions as sonomic waves. Okay, these are just emotions that come in. They're just waves, and a wave comes in and a wave goes out. An emotion comes in and emotion goes out. Okay, so drop into your chest, breathe, and let's see, dropping into breath, chest, or hands prevents spiraling into mental narratives. So this is body anchoring. You become a container instead of a prisoner for all the things that you're feeling, right? All the emotions. Now, some of the practices for spiritual help in this are these. Okay, the focus of this is not just to manage your experience, but to recognize the deeper ground of experience. To recognize this is deeper than just managing it. We don't want to I think we just stay in reactivity mode until we realize this is just not working. And some people never realize that. Some people might get really, really, really old and they're still reacting to everything, which is just part of their human experience, right? So self-inquiry. Every thought or feeling can be traced back with one question. Who notices this? Okay? What you'll find is not another thought, but pure awareness. Okay, so think about that. Ask yourself a question. Who notices this? Who notices this? Who is noticing this? Okay? What you'll find is not another thought, but pure awareness. That recognition loses the grip of your ego. When you recognize that, your ego starts to lose its grip on you. I think the ego is important, and it's also necessary to guide us through this life and help us make decisions sometimes. But that ego has a pretty horrific grip on us for so many things. And this is one of the ways that it can loosen its grip, when you literally ask yourself, who notices this? What part of you is noticing these things? Okay? Meditation. Instead of chasing pleasant states or avoiding unpleasant ones, you train yourself to sit in the middle. Okay? The realization grows. Everything arises and everything passes, and none of it defines me. How beautiful is that? And then this, gratitude and surrender, okay? Gratitude dissolves resistance. I think that this is a really important time where we are in this beautiful year of 2025 to constantly dive back to gratitude, no matter what our life looks like. There's always something to be grateful for. There's a reason that this comes up by so many mentors, so many teachers, so many people who are in your life at this point, pointing you back to being thankful, being grateful, because it changes everything. And then the whole surrender piece, right? Gratitude dissolves resistance, and surrender dismantles the illusion of control. When you surrender, it dismantles everything that you think you have control over. Because at the end of the day, the things that you think you can control are going to keep their grip on you harder because you're in that illusion that you can control it. When you surrender, when you have gratitude and you surrender, whatever the situation is, you're releasing that illusion that you can control it in the first place. And I'm not talking about the things you can control, like your finances, and like sometimes you can't control your finances, right? So both of these things, they open you into trust. Life is not happening to you, it's happening as you, okay? And I love that shift because we always hear life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And while that is also true, think about the shift of life happening as you. This is where this whole thing dropped in about, it feels like everything is about me. Because it's about how I respond, how I react. What do I choose to wash over me and absorb and all this stuff? It's actually pretty cool. And then the neuroscience piece, which I think is so beautiful. Okay, so without the body, insight can just float away. If we didn't have this body, insight would just float away. Okay, this is about anchoring realization into our biology. This is extra important from my perspective because our biology is the avatar that's walking us through this experience. And it's going to express health or disease and all of the other things that float along with it, all of that depending on our state. And if we can change the neurons of our brain because of all of this, wow, right? So slow breathing and coherence. So think about breath work. Breath work can completely, if you just focused on one thing, deepening your practice of breath work, so many things would change in your life. Long exhales calm the vagus nerve. Okay, this is a biological reaction. Quiet stress signals and leave you with more space between stimulus and response. You know, I have said before many times that when I find myself in a bit of a reactive state, which happens more often than I like to admit and has over the years, I'm holding my breath or I'm breathing really, really shallow. But this past probably year and a half, maybe even 2 years, I'll purposefully be aware that I'm holding my breath. And I'll take a deep, purposeful breath. And everything changes. Everything relaxes immediately. Breath work can change your state immediately. If anything, fill up your lungs completely. That is something for many people to be grateful for. Because I've talked to many people over the years who don't even have the ability to take a nice deep breath because maybe they've got compromised lung capacity. Maybe they were a smoker. Maybe they have air that they breathe that's not as, maybe they've just got something in their lungs that they aren't able to take a deep breath. So if you have the beautiful privilege of filling your lungs all the way to capacity and even holding it for a couple seconds and releasing slowly, that alone can change your state and your brain. Amazing, right? So then things like meditation, yoga, tai chi, qigong, all of these things are beautiful to put into your practice. What they do is they integrate awareness into your muscles and your fascia. So doing these things, these movements, right? It literally changes your state. In fact, there's a couple of Tai Chi moves that I've been doing at the end of my workout. I do a weight workout 3 to 4 times a week. And I've just been integrating some really big Tai Chi powerful movements into the end of my routine, and sometimes in the middle. Like if I'm doing some weightlifting, I need to shake my muscles out, I'll go, I'm going to integrate this amazing Tai Chi move, and it completely changes the way my workout feels. It's really incredible. And it's incredible when you experience it, not just hear about it, right? And then the nature immersion. Okay, so this is how it can change the state of your brain. Neuroscience shows natural settings reduce activity in the default mode. Okay, so, and this is again going with the ego. Being in nature mirrors spacious awareness. So think about that. When you are in nature, you are expanding your spatial awareness. You're expanding like you're getting outside. Like the room I'm in right now, there's 4 walls, there's everything. But when I go outside, it expands my spatial awareness. It changes my brain at the same time. So being in nature mirrors spacious awareness, silent, alive, and it does not need explanation. Okay? And the way you integrate this is really important. Okay? Without integration, realization stays in a meditation cushion. Okay, so if you just meditate, but you don't integrate and put these things into practice, you basically are just in a cushion. You're kind of in a cushion of non-growth. And meditation is powerful. I've done so much meditation, especially over the last 5 years, more meditation than I've ever done in my whole life. And I've realized that there is an important integration. So integration transforms your entire orientation to living. So there's compassion in action. Detachment without compassion can feel cold. So we don't want to just detach. It's not all about us. And in fact, what did I write? What am I going to call this? I want to find this because it's so good. Detachment without disengagement. Okay? I never want to disengage with this beautiful experience of being human. Never. Okay? So compassion reconnects you, but now from choice rather than compulsion. Now you're choosing. You're not being pulled into it because you're reacting to it. But then you get choice, and you get to choose exactly the way you flow out compassion, and that is even different. I say that because, well, here's what I wrote. You act because you want to, not because you're hooked into it. I have seen and had conversations with people, and especially close family members, one of my little brothers in particular, who feels the weight of the world. He is an empath. He is highly compassionate, and it kind of hurts himself because he just absorbs all of the suffering of the world because he feels helpless and he feels hopeless, and he stays in a reactivity place that almost paralyzes him. In fact, it doesn't almost paralyze him. In certain areas of his life, it does paralyze him. So he's not reacting with compassion by choice. He's reacting out of compulsion. And it's, luckily we get to connect. We had coffee a couple weeks ago, and it's lovely to be in a position where I can help ground some of my younger siblings. I was pregnant with my youngest son at the same time my mom was pregnant with him. So they're only a couple of months apart. So I feel an extra protection for this brother. And also, my dad passed when he was 15. So, there's that piece that, it's just interesting, right? We all have these things that get thrown at us. And my experience growing up in this big family as second oldest compared to my youngest couple of siblings, who were right at the bottom of this big 14 group, is very, very different. And this is something that we've talked about extensively over the years. So then because this is always something I talk about, creative expression. This helps with integration. It helps to detach without disengaging. Okay, and here's what I wrote about creative expression, because to me, this is forefront because it's helped me so much. Channeling insight from art, music, or writing grounds and integrates this in actual form. When I am painting and when I'm creating, and for years I did this really detailed doodling. I would just sit with a Sharpie and some cardstock paper, and I have things that would make up I could make up a whole coloring book of some of the things that I've doodled. And I've kind of just, I haven't doodled in probably a year or more. And I go back and I look at this stack of these things I've made, and I'm a little blown away. And part of this was done during the whole lockdowns of COVID and all the angst that I caused myself during that. And I channeled it. Into something creative, which is like, okay, that makes perfect sense to me. So channeling insight into art, music, or writing grounds it in form. The paradox is this: expression deepens silence. So that is a paradox. You know, and I've shared with you before the zone that I get in when I'm painting. It's unbelievable until you experience it. And then this sharing and teaching. Okay, this is another beautiful way to integrate all of this into your life. Sharing doesn't mean preaching. Okay, it's offering your realization as a story, a metaphor, or just simply presence. You know, that's probably been the biggest thing for me. Is I find now that I can just be in any situation, any conversation, and the lack of triggering or reactivity at what people are saying, whether they're talking about politics that normally would have triggered me, or situations that are happening, or drama within a family or in a friendship group. The place of quiet observation and still holding compassion when I hear things that require that is really an incredible place to land. So it doesn't mean preaching, right? It's a realization as a story, a metaphor, or just your presence. When you voice it, you hear it anew. So when you are in a place where you can voice something, you're hearing it differently because you're in a different place, okay? Your ego has less room to subtly claim it, okay? Your ego has less room. I love that. Okay, so then, of course, this is what I had to do, is write you out some questions, and I'm going to end with these questions. Okay, so these are designed not to be comfortable, okay? I wanted you to really see yourself in these questions and journal on them with some really good reflection, because the goal is detachment without disengagement, okay? If nothing in the world could ever disturb me again, would I still care about humanity, or would I drift into indifference? Okay? That's a great question. That's why it's number one. Okay? If nothing in the world could ever disturb me, ever disturb your peace, ever again, okay? Would you still care about humanity? Okay, that's detachment without disengagement. What part of me still secretly wants to be triggered just to feel alive? Oh, baby. You know, think about people when a couple has a horrific fight, and then they make up, and then they, you know, that is a piece of humanity that is a powerful piece of an emotional being that we all are. Okay? What part of me still secretly wants to be triggered just to feel alive? I'm telling you, you can still have all of the stuff that a big fight will trigger and then bring you back to love and gratitude and all of that without the fight. You can still have that, okay? If my identity is dissolving into awareness, what am I most afraid of losing? Maybe just your ego, right? You know, it's something that, it's kind of a beautiful place to land, right? When I say it's all about me, okay, because that is what dropped into my journal first. I feel like it's all about me. Actually, that second part of my journaling. Okay, so when I say it's all about me, am I pointing to pure awareness, or is there still hidden ego trying to wear this awareness as like look at me, look at my crown, look at my halo? That is still a part of an ego that's coming in, okay? When you say this is all about me, are you coming from a place of just deep awareness And to me, it's like, wow, this place of gratitude and observation and this kind of awareness is really amazing. If compassion arises from detachment, how do I ensure it doesn't become pity, superiority, or just performative kindness? Okay, those are really super important thoughts to journal about. Because it's all a piece of the puzzle. You don't want to detach so much that you lose that. And does it become just pity? No, I don't want to just pity somebody, ever, 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 ever. In fact, I've reached a point that I don't ever even say, "Oh, I feel so sorry for you." That doesn't come like a place of compassion. It doesn't feel like that to me. That might feel like compassion for you, and that's also okay. But to me, that feels like a little bit like pity. So, how do I ensure that it doesn't become pity, superiority? Okay, that's easy. So easy to feel superiority. We're programmed into that. Or just performative kindness. Do you just perform kindness when you're with someone who might judge you if you don't, or who will judge you more positively if you are being kind to whomever, in whatever situation you're in, right? And then this, if I stop trying to be spiritual or awake, what raw truth about myself would be left? I mean, we're all, that is also a performative type of, oh, look how spiritual I am. You might even just be performing it, right? Or look how aware I am. Look how awake I am. What is the raw truth about myself that would be left? Okay, and then this, where in my life am I still secretly bargaining with reality, saying this, I'll accept this, but only if it looks the way I want? That's a great question. What if I look at humanity with detachment? When I look at humanity with attachment, am I truly free? Or am I just protecting myself from being hurt? Okay, this was a very deep question that felt very relevant to me, because as a person who has, I have been through a lot, I might make things look all perfect, and I know I say that on a regular basis too, but to me it's like, am I just trying, let me say this again, when I look at humanity with detachment, am I truly free? Or am I just protecting myself from being hurt? Okay, what stories about who I am I still unwilling to burn to the ground or burn into the ashes? Okay, what stories about who I am I still willing to burn to the ground? Or still unwilling? What are you unwilling to release about who you are? To me, the knowledge and the awareness that I'm a divine spark of pure love and consciousness, I'm a piece of God and creation, as are you. The drop in of that dissolves everything. Dissolves everything to me that feels like could be egotistical. That's a really beautiful place to land. Okay, and then this final question. If awareness is vast and impersonal, why do I still crave to feel special within it? This is something that still feels very relevant to me. Okay? Because we all crave to feel different. We all crave to feel special. And when you just have the realization that you are special, you don't need someone else to tell you how special you are. You might still be in a space of growth and awareness and on the learning path where maybe you do need that. And I know people in my life, in all aspects of my life, who still need that. And I do my best to give it in a way that's not just, I don't know how to describe, but just not just, I try to help them realize that they're already perfect and special exactly how they are. Okay, so I want to read that one again. If awareness is vast and impersonal, why do I still crave to feel special within it? Okay, I know these are not easy answers or easy questions or easy answers. Okay, so here's what I wrote. These are not for quick answers. I feel like this list of questions, These are for deep reflective times with your journal or just with yourself, okay? They're meant to crack things open, to unsettle things, and to maybe jolt you into a place of more detachment without disengagement, okay? And I think what happens then when you do this and you maybe sit with these questions is it allows for deeper truths to come in, and just a realization that it is all about you, but in a different way than you might think. Okay, so I'd love to know what you think about this. Did any of this trigger you into, okay, there's some massive ego coming from Jane? You know, I find all of this so fascinating, and sometimes I just want to go, oh, you know, especially when I wrote at the first of my week, you know, is the suffering necessary? What about, like David Icke says about gathering loosh and all of the dimensions and all of the evil forces and all of the suffering of humanity? And it's just like, whoa. So this is honestly where you just have to dip out. You have to disengage. You have to detach. So not disengage, not that. So let me say this again. Because detachment without disengaging. Because I don't want to disengage from life. I don't want to disengage from the beauty, from the gratitude, from the fun, from the experiences. In fact, I want to detach so that I can engage more. So I could go on about that and maybe not make a lot of sense. So I'd love to know what you guys think about this. Tomorrow, if you're watching this on Sunday, August 31st, tomorrow, 1st of September, brilliant, beautiful month. Both my boys were born in September, and I love the month of September. It's just fall is getting ready to start, and it's a beautiful time to hike here in Utah and just really get out in nature before the weather turns cold, and it's just such a perfect month. And I think that when we throw a lens of gratitude over this whole awareness journey that we're on, it really can change everything. So thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. I love you so much, and we will see you next time.